able to leave Weeping Tree Books. After the fire, the law firm that manages the bookstore's finances refurnished the employee's room. It was a lot more comfortable after the remodel, but there was no escaping the truth. Weeping Tree Books was my prison, and one day it would be my tomb. In the bright May sunshine outside, I could see a business owner on his way to the accounting firm next door, a single mom chatting with a nail stylist from the salon, and a line of construction workers getting some badly needed food at the Chinese restaurant across the plaza. These people had their problems, no doubt, but they were rational ones, not like the problems of Elizabeth, who had been screaming outside my door. Last Tuesday, a girl came into Weeping Tree Books and stopped uncertainly in front of my desk. Her auburn hair was a mess. There were dark circles under her eyes, and the cuffs of her oversized jacket had begun to fray. I had a feeling that she had been pulling at their strings obsessively. Elizabeth was the name stitched into the work uniform that she wore underneath. Even before she opened her mouth, I was worried about her. Worried about what might have brought her to my shop. She asked where the self-help section was. I told her that we didn't have one, which was a lie, and that she was unlikely to find any books on the subject here, which was even more untrue. I had hoped that my answer would make her turn around and leave, but instead she just bit her lip and headed into the stacks. I had physically tried to stop customers before. The bookstore didn't like that, not at all, so I had no choice but to let Elizabeth go. I wondered if she noticed how the aisle that she was walking down was much longer than it should have been. From where she was standing, the display window would have appeared postage stamp small if she had turned around to look, but she never did. And whatever she had come here for, she was intent on finding it, and Weeping Tree Books would make sure that she did. Rather than a random walk-in from the street or some dangerous denizen of the supernatural, Elizabeth was likely the sort of customer who had heard rumors about the store, or read some anonymous post online about the knowledge that it contained. Weeping Tree Books held secrets with the power to change a life, or destroy it. I grabbed a cart and I headed after her. I told myself that I wasn't snooping. I was just getting some new items for the display window, and I was almost able to believe it. Elizabeth turned down a passage to my left. Keeping her in the corner of my eye, I began to stack the trolley with summer thriller novels. I tried to avoid the true crime section. A lot of it hadn't happened yet. Elizabeth stood wide-eyed in front of a wall of self-help volumes that hadn't been there the night before. She took down a guide called Dark Reflections, Coming Face to Face with Your Own Worst Self. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I had never heard of the book before, but something told me that this was going to be a bad one. A warning rose in my throat, but before I could think of a way to distract her, Elizabeth had opened up to the table of contents. She bit her lip again as she read, completely focused on a way to get free from the part of herself that hurt. Was it an addiction, a mental disorder, or just the same character traits that she had always lived with, the ones that kept sabotaging her success over and over again? I wasn't sure, but whatever it was slowly taking shape in front of her. She was too focused on her reading to see how the shadows of the narrow, dimly lit aisle had coalesced into a copy of herself. By the time she looked up, another Elizabeth was staring at her from across the page. The new Elizabeth's hair hung down low over its face. It wiggled its fingers and toes, which, like the rest of it, were bare. It was as though it had never had a body before, and it needed to test its own strength. Elizabeth dropped the book and sprang back with a shout. It double gripped her by the hair and smashed her head against the nearest shelf. She fought back, punching her attacker and kneeing it in the chest. But just as it had been when it was a part of her, the darkness was stronger. It wrestled her to the ground and prepared to crush her eyes with its thumbs. The real Elizabeth squirmed backwards and slipped free. She ran to the wall of books at the end of the hallway and tried to feign right. Her dark half caught her in a headlock until she bit its arm and kicked it away. They rounded a corner and I ran after them. When Elizabeth's dark half pinned her for a second time, I gave my book cart a shove and sent it rolling into her. I had hoped that the impact would give the real Elizabeth a chance to get away. But when the cart had staggered her doppelganger, she didn't flee. Instead, she doubled down on her attack, bashing her elbow into its face again and again. The smoke-gray liquid that pooled from its wounds was nothing like blood, and with a feral shout, it bounded on all fours towards the depths of the bookstore. Elizabeth shot me an angry glare, and at last I understood that she didn't want to escape. She meant for this to end here one way or another. Without another word, she chased after her double. I, meanwhile, returned to my cart. I picked up the copy of Dark Reflections from where it had fallen on the floor. If I squinted, I could almost see a razor-thin smile forming in the air in front of me. I shuddered and reshelved it as quickly as possible. I didn't see who won the fight, but I do know that neither of them survived. The grisly duel plays out again each night. The same high-pitched shrieks and wild blows, rampaging through the store until dawn. I try to stay out of their way. I don't like to think what might happen if both sides of Elizabeth looked up from their struggle to find a living, flesh-and-blood target for all that hate. Eliza and Beth locked forever in a death or death struggle. I wrote that line in a letter to my girlfriend Amy, thinking that it would sound clever or funny. But when I thought about their angry screams echoing forever down all these empty aisles, I couldn't bring myself to laugh. After the shrieks finally stopped, I wash my dishes, dress, and leave the employee's room to open the store. As always, I hesitate in the doorway for a long moment before stepping out into the bookshop. The sunlight streaming through the display window banishes most of the horrors that inhabit Weeping Tree Books, but it never quite gets all of them. That morning, everything seemed quiet. There were no swarms of hideous centipedes creeping along the shelves, no ink-blooded horrors leering around the corner of the aisles. I got to work on the first task of the day, which was always the same: preparing special orders for pickup. The clients of Weeping Tree Books didn't have much tolerance for delays or mistakes, so the correct volume always had to be prepared as soon as possible. I was on my way to fetch a 16th century copy of the Mirabilis Liber when I first noticed the door. Where a bookshelf should have been, there was now a wall with an open door. It looked exactly like the ugly wood-paneled door of the employee's room, but there were no lights on inside. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I froze, like a child waiting for a monster to emerge from their closet. But the store was dead silent. The longer I stood still, the more that I noticed other, more subtle differences in the store around me. The shelves rearranging themselves was nothing new, but now the carpet was a dull deep sea blue instead of a greenish gray. The lights too had changed, becoming glass globes that were more stylish than the bare incandescent bulbs that I was used to. Almost reluctantly, I looked toward the display window. The plaza was gone, and I had never seen the street outside in my life. The people in oddly cut clothes hurried by, and were those zeppelins that I saw in the sky. The only feature I recognized was the willow planted as if by accident among the other shaded trees that lined the boulevard outside. The door behind me creaked, as though moved by an unseen breeze. Someone was coming, I was sure of it. I scrambled behind the end cap of the nearest aisle and I pressed my back against it listening. A girl ran past. I got only a fleeting glimpse of her, but she seemed to be dressed in the same odd outfit as the people outside, and her amber eyes were wide with fear. She was clutching her hand to her chest like it hurt her. She didn't even look my way as she bolted into the lightless room. I waited a few minutes to make sure that the coast was clear and then returned to what I had been doing. Thankfully, the blue guideline cable was still there and I could follow it to the prophecies section and retrieve my client's order. As I walked, the store slowly returned to the layout that I was used to. The bare yellowish bulbs and the ugly gray-green carpet were back, as well as the plaza outside the display window. With the book in hand, I walked back to the front desk, asking myself if I had done the right thing. I told myself that I had. In places like Weeping Tree Books, speaking first or intervening could be dangerous, even deadly. I felt bad for the girl, whoever she was, but I had my own survival to think about, right? By the time that I prepared the morning's orders, the woman in the black turtleneck had already arrived. She came in every day at 10 a.m. on the dot. She never spoke or bought anything, but she didn't cause trouble either. Mostly, she just drew in the large sketchbook that she carried and observed the other patrons. It was odd behavior to be sure, but probably harmless. Or so I thought at the time. Sometimes I had a chance to peek over the woman in black's shoulder at her drawing pad. I discovered that so far she had drawn the display window, a reading nook, and even my work area behind the desk. I was surprised and maybe a little insulted that she had never asked to draw me as well. Maybe I thought uneasily she had, just without my permission. Maybe she had illustrated me being stalked by hungry monstrosities with limbs too long for their bodies. Maybe she had drawn me being pulled apart by a mob or psychotic, grinning customers. Maybe some of the evil that I had encountered in the bookshop was her fault. I forced myself to stop. With so much time to think, it was easy to descend into obsession and paranoia. My long, lonely months at the bookstore had convinced me that it wasn't safe for anyone to be alone with their own thoughts, especially not in a place like Weeping Tree Books. For all I knew, the woman in the turtleneck sweater was just a hobby artist who liked to draw cozy interior scenes. Even so, her presence in the store always made me feel uneasy, observed somehow. The way she wandered into the depths of the store only to reappear hours later reminded me too much of Jacob, the graduate researcher who had planned to sell the store's deadly knowledge to the highest bidder. He had been looking for books on the creation of plagues. God only knew what the woman in the black turtleneck was after. Without realizing it, I found myself trying to follow her while I shelved new books or took inventory. And that was where the trouble started. After nearly a year as the bookkeeper, I thought I knew most of the entities that appeared in these shallow levels of the bookstore. Entities like the Burning Man, a former bookkeeper who had tried to set fire to the store to escape it. Now his spirit was cursed to wander these halls, shrouded in flame. Or there were the mimics, being with no appearance of their own that stole the faces of others. Their inability to blink usually gave them away before they got too close. Usually. Like a well-traveled trucker who knows which route has the worst traffic and which is the quickest in bad weather, I had become accustomed to them. I thought I could afford the distraction of keeping an eye on the woman in the black turtleneck. I was wrong. The woman's high-heeled boots echoed eerily in the stuffy, low-ceilinged store. When she turned a corner and stopped, I thought it would be the perfect moment to sneak a look at what she was drawing. And when I peered around the shelves, however, she was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the door was back. opening impossibly into the surface of a standalone bookshelf. The carpet, I noticed, was a mottled mix of blue and green. Half of the lights were incandescent, half were the odd globes that I had seen earlier, and one was even a twisted mix of the two. I could hear the sound of weeping from inside the door. I backed slowly around a corner, and when I looked again, the strange room had vanished. Meanwhile, the echo of the woman in black's footsteps had returned. I spotted her in an intersection several aisles down. How had she gotten so far away so quickly? She paused, as though curious about what I would do next. I felt the frustration rise in me. The whole situation was absurd. Why shouldn't I just talk to her? This wasn't some fairy tale hag who would steal my name if I gave it to her, or some sadistic killer who cut out the tongues of anybody who spoke to them. This was just some lady with a sketchbook. "Hey," I waved and smiled. The woman in the black turtleneck glared at me for a full 10 seconds and then kept walking. I don't know why I went after her. Maybe it was just stupid pride. I had spent so much time pondering her presence in the store. I felt like she owed me an explanation. Even more disturbingly, I realized that I had come to think of Weeping Tree Books as my own home turf. And who was she to turn her back on me in my territory? It was like something out of a kid's cartoon. Every time I thought I was getting close, she would appear at the crossing on some other aisle, tantalizingly far away. The longer the chase went on, the harder it was to abandon, even though I knew in the back of my mind that the woman in the black turtleneck was leading me deeper into the bookstore. I made sure to keep the blue guideline cable on the floor in sight, but that was the only exception that I made for my own safety. When the door to that dark room had reappeared, I barely gave it a second glance. I needed to catch the woman in the black turtleneck now. What if she never came back after this? What if I never found out what she had been doing here? I was too caught up in my own spiraling thoughts to realize that I had been led into a dead end. I stared, disbelieving at the 3 solid walls of books around me. There is no path for the woman in black to have taken, and yet she was undeniably gone. I jabbed my fingernails into the cracks between the shelves. They were immovable and airtight. Sighing, I turned back to the central corridor, but it too had disappeared. In its place was a wall with a familiar wide-open door, a door that led to a lightless room and seemed to swing softly in an invisible breeze. I shifted my weight and felt the floor sag beneath my feet, a reminder that this was really happening. I didn't want to take a single step toward that eerily familiar and lightless room. And at the same time, I was suddenly sure that someone was inside of it, approaching swiftly but silently, like a child closing his eyes when a monster comes out of the closet. I believed that as long as I didn't look, as long as I stood still and pretended that everything was normal, then I would be safe. Sweat trickled down my spine as I pretended to reorganize the cheesy 1950s sci-fi novels in front of me. Oh, the tension was unbearable. As though pulled by an invisible string, I glanced back toward the open door, and I saw a pair of bloodshot amber eyes staring into mine. A mummy. That was my first thought. Something out of an old horror movie, embalmed with yellow wrappings. But it wasn't wrapped in linen or gauze. It was covered in pages, thousands of them stuck so tightly to its body that they at first appeared to be its skin. No, not its skin. Her skin. Because what was beneath all of those words and illustration had once undeniably been human. I braced myself for an attack, but instead, the mummified stranger stumbled to her knees and gripped my hand. "Help," she whispered. A page unraveled from her finger and wrapped around mine. Its underside was sticky, rubbery, and oddly warm to the touch. By the time I tried to pull it off, it had already started multiplying, unfolding another sheaf around my palm. I felt a twinge of pain as words and illustrations bloomed across the paper, being written, I realized, in my own blood. The mummified girl's eyes widened, horrified by what she had done. Beneath the wrappings, her face was a mask of guilt and fear as she backed away into the darkness. Meanwhile, the unraveling pages had reached my wrist. I pulled out my lighter, hoping that its flame would block their path. Yet when I singed the yellow paper, it hurt as badly as burning my own skin. I looked around desperately for a solution, barely noticing that both the open door and the mummified stranger had vanished once again. "Hold still," someone said. The woman in the black turtleneck poised a very fancy pen above my arm. Before I could ask what she intended to do, she started drawing fat, black droplets like raindrops encircling my bicep. The expanding pages dropped to the floor when the ink had touched them, blackened like withered leaves. In a matter of seconds, the paper that had been fusing with my flashlight crumbled, stained and harmless on the bookstore floor. "Oh, it's a shame," the woman added. "If those pages had kept expanding, you would have been able to read the story of your life on them. At least until they finished draining you." "Who was that?" I mumbled, rubbing my arm. "What? You think our reality is the only one with a bookstore like this one? The only one with a bookkeeper like you?" The woman in the black turtleneck scoffed. "The border between worlds is thin here, as you all know, and sometimes they overlap." Had that girl been a bookkeeper too? One of the unlucky ones who had succumbed to the store before she realized what she had gotten herself into? If things had gone differently, my fate could have been the same as hers. I was so lost in thought that it took me a moment to realize the woman in the black turtleneck was holding out her hand to me. Sorry about the game of hide and seek. I only wanted to get you back into the right reality before it was too late. My name is Eliza, by the way, and you, young man, must be the bookkeeper." "You know about this place? What it really is, I mean?" I asked, stunned. "You don't think all of your customers are monsters, do you?" Eliza smirked. "Oh, there's knowledge here, and like any knowledge, it can be used for good, or for evil. Personally, I just like what it does to my illustrations." Eliza held up her sketchbook. The most recent drawing was an odd perspective, looking down from the ceiling. It showed two people standing in a narrow aisle between the bookshelves. It was Eliza and I. She looked up suddenly, and the figure in her drawing did the same. The unsettling sensation that she was watching me from within the page made me recoil a bit. Eliza chuckled. "You've seen one of my pieces before. I made an album once full of illustrations of prison cells. Does that sound familiar?" I knew the book she was referring to. A kidnapper in a pig mask had used it to capture children. "That's your idea of a work of art?" I glared at her. "Like I said, power can be used to help or to harm, and I would like to help you if I can." Eliza hesitated. "Let me ask you something. Do you like being the bookkeeper? Would you leave if you could?" "Well, of course I would, but it doesn't matter. I won't be going out that door until after I'm dead." "Exactly," Eliza nodded. "The bookstore uses your body to care for itself while you're alive, but it places no claim on your soul unless you give it a reason to, like poor Elizabeth or Eugene, the Burning Man. If your soul were to leave your physical body, then return to it." She trailed off. I asked Eliza if she meant that I should fake my own death. "Oh, there will be nothing fake about it," she warned me grimly. "You will be dead. Dead as a doornail, dead as a post, dead as whatever simile or metaphor you want to use." You will have to navigate the other side on your own. But as long as you stay away from the light and remember who you are, then you should be fine. Once the store releases your corpse, I will bind your soul back to it. And then, Ben Hearn, you'll finally be free." I couldn't recall ever having told her my name, but that hardly seemed to matter now. All of this was crazy talk, the sort of thing that a cult leader might tell his followers right before he laced their drinks with cyanide. I shook my head. "I know I'm asking for a lot of trust," the woman in the black turtleneck admitted, "and that's why I'm going to prove to you that it works." "What? How?" I had barely finished the question when Eliza lunged forward and stabbed her pen into my jugular. The pain and terror of having a sharp foreign object embedded in my neck was overwhelming. Quantities of blood that I had never imagined my veins could contain ran down my chest as Eliza lowered me gently to the floor. "Oh, sorry about the mess," she whispered, and my vision went as dark as ink. And during the long, dull hours that I had spent as bookkeeper, one of the things that I had often read about was near-death experiences. Was there a reason why they seemed so similar across time and across cultures? Did the human mind simply generate a set series of sensations during its final moments? Or could it be that the events that people described happening to them after death had really occurred? Sitting behind the front desk, I had pored through book after book on the subject. Now I was about to find out for myself. The weightlessness and feeling of falling, well, that was real, as was the flurry of images that fluttered up around me like a mass of birds taking flight. Friends, a family, pivotal moments in my life, side by side with the others I had ignored at the time, but that now came back in vivid detail. The darkness swallowed it all. It was indescribably huge, and bigger than the night sky the first time my father took me camping in the desert. Bigger than anything. I had never imagined that emptiness could be so terrifying. And then there it was, a soft and distant white light. As strange as it sounds, it seemed to be calling out to me, telling me that everything was going to be all right. I could move toward it if I chose. I could be held, welcomed, comforted. All I had to do was want it. I noticed uneasily that the light itself wasn't stationary either. It was drifting slowly nearer. But hadn't Eliza told me not to go toward the light? I must have misheard her, because the closer it came, the more at ease I felt, as though my soul was being wrapped up in warm blankets. A song like a lullaby in 1,000 different languages soothed the panic that I had felt when I began plunging through all that emptiness. And then I noticed something on the edges of that gentle white glow. They weren't exactly cobwebs or the crooked limbs of some enormous spider, but they reminded me a little of both. If I squinted, I thought that I could see the tortured expressions of the figures that were bound to them. Although whether they were writhing to break free or urging me onward, I couldn't have said. I tried to slow my drifting, only to find that I couldn't. It was like a tiny boat trapped by an immense tide. There was nothing to hold on to, no way to stop my progress. I didn't even have arms or legs to flail as I was pulled toward the light. I thought about the message it had given me, about how I had to choose to move toward it. And what would happen if I chose the emptiness instead? Slowly, I felt my speed slowing until I was moving downward and backward instead of forward. The light grew distant but never completely faded or ceased to beckon me toward it. Eliza's advice and pure chance were the only reasons that I had seen the twisted forms lurking the light. The only reason that I had enjoyed them. How many others had succumbed to the temptation? How many others had gone trustingly toward that hopeful glow? I racked my brain trying to remember what else Eliza had said. Something about remembering who I was. Well, that didn't seem so difficult. At least, not until I tried to do it. The memories that had swirled around me when my fall began had disappeared like water going down a drain. I realized with horror that I couldn't even remember what my father's face looked like. The light far away now seemed to be mocking me. Was this what it was going to be like from now on? An endless plunge through a sightless and soundless eternity, until I lost myself completely. Until I became part of all of this nothing. What had I been doing right before this? Who had I been? That's right, I had been the bookkeeper. I had been trapped in a store and a woman in black had offered me a way out. And then, I winced at the memory of the sharp pen plunging into my neck. And before that, there had been a girl too. A girl named Amy. Her family had run the Chinese restaurant across the plaza. She had saved my life and I had saved hers. She had told me that she would wait for me until I could escape from the bookstore. Hold on, I told myself. Hold on. The harder I focused, the more the darkness around me began to fade. I was no longer falling, but hovering. If I looked down, I could see Eliza dragging my corpse out through the door of Weeping Tree Books and into the center of the plaza. She heaved me onto one of the stone benches surrounding the big willow, and then began drawing a series of strange chalk symbols around it. If I looked up, I could still see the emptiness that I had fallen through and the welcoming light in the distance. It whispered that it wasn't too late. I could still join the chorus of voices within. Now hold on. I forced myself to focus on simple things. The gray rock of the benches, the scratch and pastel colors of Eliza's chalk, the wind through the willow tree, its gnarled roots. From my new out-of-body perspective, the stuff that those roots sank into no longer looked like ordinary dirt at all. Whatever it looked as black and liquid as molten tar. The stuff rippled. There was movement within. A hand emerged from its inky surface. Something was pulling itself free and moving toward my lifeless body. It was vaguely man-shaped. It was so dark that it seemed to consume the light around it. Eliza stopped scrawling symbols and looked up, as though she had sensed that something wasn't quite right. But I was clearly the only one who could see the figure rising from beneath the tree. I willed myself down toward the ground, maneuvering between my own body and the living shadow. It clambered up to its full height. Its arms and fingers seemed a little too stretched, its legs bent in the wrong direction. A tendril wisp of something like smoke connected its head to the black liquid at the base of the tree. It narrowed its all too human, honey-brown eyes at me. And then it grabbed me. I had thought that being incorporeal would for some reason make it impossible to feel pain. I was wrong about that. When the thing squeezed, it didn't bruise skin or break bones. Instead, it seemed to be smothering my very self. Everything that made me, me, flickered like a flame cut from fresh air. It was going to take whatever energy I had left, and then it was going to take possession of my flesh. My body would awaken when Eliza completed her ritual, but I wouldn't be the one inside of it. I couldn't let it end like this. I had suffered too much and sacrificed too much to let it end like this. The thought made me burn bright with anger, and the dark figure clinging onto me loosened its grip, and then it clenched down again with renewed force. I fed that anger and that righteousness, all of the energy that I had. My attacker dropped me, threw its emaciated hands up to the front of its face, and retreated toward the pool of shadow. My glow continued to intensify, out of control until it had swallowed Eliza, the bookshop square, and even the sky in an endless sea of brightness. It was the last thing that I knew before I opened my real physical eyes. Eliza gazed down at me with an "I told you so" smirk spread across her face. I sat up unsteadily, running my fingers over the odd chalk squiggles that were already fading from the stone bench that I lay on. A cool breeze blew across my face. For the first time in nearly a year, I was looking at the display window of Weeping Tree Books from the outside. "What happens now?" I asked Eliza. "The store just stays empty until some poor schmuck wanders in and gets trapped till the day that he dies." "No," Eliza stood. "I will be the next bookkeeper. Why do you think that I helped you? Out of the goodness of my heart." She laughed mirthlessly. A low-gray cloud drifted in front of the sun, and suddenly the late spring day felt a little colder. "Oh, I've been around a long time, and this world holds no more secrets for me, and nothing out here can compare to the wonder within those walls." I remembered of a quote from a 300-year-old book that I had flipped through once in the store, one called Paradise Lost. "The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell or a hell of heaven." I asked her if she was sure about this. "I brought you back from the dead," she reminded me. "I would like to think I know what I'm doing, wouldn't you?" And she had a point. Wind ruffled her silky brown hair. What was I supposed to do now? Thank her? Offer her a hug or a handshake? Eliza seemed above all of those things somehow ancient and terrible in a way that I hadn't noticed earlier. Before I could decide how to react, she had snatched up her sketchbook and her small black handbag and began walking toward Weeping Tree Books. She stepped through the door without a single look back. I never saw her again. A light rain began to fall. I turned my face toward it and I shut my eyes. I was free. My first call, of course, was to Amy, and my second was to Osgood Mosby, the bookstore's lawyer. He struggled to keep his cool after hearing my voice on the phone. Nothing like this had ever happened before, he admitted, and he supposed that some amount of compensation was in order. It wasn't much, considering what I had been through, but it was a start. Piece by piece, I began to put together a life. I tried to not think about shadowy figures waiting to slip beneath my skin, or the horror of the light that so many people saw in their final moments. I didn't ever want to return to the plaza of Weeping Tree Books, but considering that Amy's parents' restaurant was located there, I didn't have much choice. When I finally did find the strength to go back, however, I was shocked by what I found. There was a for sale sign in the bookstore's display window, and when I peered inside, I saw only an empty, ordinary storefront. Stranger still, the gnarled willow at the center of the plaza had simply vanished. I asked John Way and the beauticians at the nail salon what had happened to it, but none of them could recall there having ever been a tree in the plaza at all. Was Weeping Tree Books gone for good? Maybe Eliza had found a way to seal it off from the sane, rational world, or maybe it had been sucked back into whatever anomalous space it had come from. I wanted to believe it, but I knew better. I know that somewhere out there on some small town's main street, or in some suburbs, a dying strip mall, there's a bookshop with a willow tree out front. Maybe there's a woman with a black turtleneck sitting inside, taking notes on some old manuscript or sketching her customers while they browse the shelves. I hope so, because if not, if the chair behind that front desk is empty, the next bookkeeper will be whoever walks through the front door. It could be anybody, and maybe even you.